I was recently a guest on a podcast, and I was interviewed about my experience as a police officer. For those of you that don't know, I used to be a police officer in the Dallas area, and I got to experience quite a few things, some good and some bad. One of the questions that I was asked is, did I experience or witness racism while I was a police officer? And my answer was, of course I did. Law enforcement is no different from any other industry or profession. You are going to work with people who hold some racist views. Now, I have no problem with you being racist as long as you don't allow that to impact your decision making and how you treat people or how you dispense justice. No matter how you feel about people, you should treat everyone equally and according to the law. Well, that wasn't always the case because I worked with some officers who I knew were vehement racists, and they would allow that to cloud their judgment or taint their actions, if you will. And from time to time, I would witness them making traffic stops where they were profiling Black people or Hispanics. And I would make it my point, if I was not tied up on another call, I would just kind of casually pass by the traffic stop and pull over. And I would check on the people in the vehicle, and then I would maybe have a conversation with the officer. And one officer really comes to mind when I talk about this, but I won't call his name. And I'd say, hey man, what you got these guys pulled over for? And he'd make up some weak probable cause or reasonable suspicion or what have you as to why he pulled them over. And I give him the look and I said, man, you profile these people. And that was before we had body cams. So I said, man, you cut these people loose, man. These guys didn't do anything. As a matter of fact, one time he pulled someone over and he said they were suspicious. They were driving slow through the neighborhood. And this happened to be an upscale neighborhood. And this was a Black man and his family. So he had a wife and two little children in the car. And they were driving a nice vehicle. I believe it was a Mercedes. And he said he pulled them over because they were suspicious and they were driving slow through the neighborhood. Now, mind you, the speed limit was 15. So I reminded the officer of that. And I also reminded him, well, when you run that tag, the man actually is going home. He lives 2 houses up. The address is on this street. So of course he was frustrated with me and kicked the guy loose. But yeah, we saw lots of things like that. The other question I was asked is, what were some of the differences, or were there any differences in crime in the different communities? The interesting thing is this: every community has crime. I don't care who you are, where you live, whether it's an upscale or whether it's a lower economic community. There's crime everywhere, whether it's property crime, whether it's drugs, whatever the case. But I know some people, especially those who are racist and like to point out that Black people are violent and we are to be feared. Let me just tell you this, or let me ask you this question. When is the last time you heard of a mass shooting or an active shooter at a Booker T. Washington High School? When's the last time you heard of a mass shooting at a Phyllis Wheatley High School, or W.E. Du Bois High School, Jack Yates High School? When's the last time you heard that? I would be interested. If you have that data, let me know. And I'm not talking about Pookie got mad at Johnny and they had a beef and Pookie shot Johnny. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about AR-15 going through the school, just indiscriminately shooting people, folks having to shelter in place, law enforcement having to respond with the SWAT team, standoff, the whole nine. I'm talking about that. I got to be specific because, you got some people that are racist and they'll come on here and they'll try to blur the lines. So that's what I'm talking about. So when you come with your data, show me that. Now, I got to be specific with you guys because you guys like to play stupid. I can also tell you that in certain schools that drug use is higher than it is in others. I can tell you, I've worked both communities. I've worked Black communities. I've worked predominantly white communities. Drug usage in predominantly white communities is higher, especially when it comes to pills, the opioids, and meth. It's a lot higher. Marijuana, definitely a lot higher. Cocaine, definitely a lot higher in those communities. Why? Because a lot of times they have the disposable income. I go to the Black communities, you may have some marijuana in the schools, but it's not, the drug usage is not nearly as high. You may go to a Black school and there may be more fights in some of the Black schools. That somebody has a beef with someone. And it's not to say that they don't have fights in the white school, but it's going to be a little bit higher in some of the Black schools. But I can just tell you there are things distinct to each community. If I go into a white community, I can tell you right now pedophilia is high. I can tell you that the registry for sex offenders is very high in a lot of white communities. I can tell you that assault family violence is very high. Opioid abuse, pill prescription shopping, a lot of that stuff is very high. A lot of fraud, a lot of theft, very high in white communities. You got crime in every community. And I know people like to quote the FBI stats and only show you one half and say that, hey, Black on Black crime is very high versus white on white crime. Not if you go back and look at all the statistics. The FBI shows that Black on Black crime, if you want to call it that, is roughly about 86%. Well, if you look at white on white crime, it's roughly about 84%. And you know why that is? Because most people, if you're going to assault or kill or commit some sort of crime against another person, is usually someone who lives in your community or in the vicinity of where you live. That's just the nature of the beast. That's how it works. So instead of just showing one side of the stats, I need you to also show that other column where it says crimes committed by white people and who are the victims versus who are the offenders. So there's crime in every community. And when someone tries to show you or try to depict one race as being more violent over the other or more prone to violence over the other, look at all the data. Look at all of the data. Don't just take their word for it. And they like to use that per capita thing. But overall, the statistics show that white people commit more crimes. And the defense is, well, per capita, you guys commit more crimes because you're only 13, 14% of the population, yet you commit half the crimes. If you're going by per capita, white people commit a lot of crimes. Hispanics commit crimes. You know who commit the lowest amount of crimes? Asians, according to the data. So if anybody wants to beat their chest and brag about the low commission of crimes in their community, it's probably Asians. But white people, y'all don't have that. You don't have that luxury to do that. I've worked in your communities. I've taken a lot of you to jail. Yes, I have. So, but anyway, that's just my experience, the interview that I had, and I was asked about these questions, and I just thought I'd share it with you. Let me know your thoughts. All right, man, y'all take care. I'm gonna get out of here. Have a good one.